Hello and welcome to the Deader Dudes. I'm Izzy.
I'm Raka. Hello, Dead Air Nation.
Hello, Deader Nation. Greetings and salutations. Once again, we are back with another part of our Bad JuJu series. This time, we are talking about life after death.
Life after death. Is it a thing? Is it real? Is it quantifiable? Does it exist? Is there anything after this?
So, want to start off, Rocco, or you want me to start?
Okay, so let's deep dive into this.
Do it.
This is a very deep, profound, introspective look into a question that's been on everybody's mind since the beginning of time, since man can cultivate a tool, can appreciate the finality of his existence and other people's existence and mourn loved ones and give birth to new children. I mean, it's probably the oldest question out there. Not why we love, not why I love you, why does the sun rise? Is this all that there is?
Right.
And so how to approach this topic? Then first give a clarification on what death is. Now, it sounds very oversimplified. You're dead, you're not living. But there needs to be some background in order for us to go forward in a very in-depth discussion. Now, death defined by many medical entities is a loss of lung, circulatory, and brain function. We didn't always get to that level. There's been Harvard standard in the 1950s, 1960s that defined it as heart and lungs and circulation. But obviously there's gray holes too. There's soft spots to that theory. What about with the help and assistance of modern medical technology, a body remains in existence through the help of machines, respirators, machines that pump your own blood until you get a transplant. Now there's transplant, there's coma patients, there's brain dead, and then there's body dead. And then where the two merge, people have come back from comas, people have come back from clinical certifications of being dead, and have come back to life. So where do we make that delineation if it's not a 100% clear cut line?
Well, I mean,
so let's start there, and then what we define as death today. Death.
Is there consciousness after death?
Right.
There's
so
of things. You have the mind-body dualism, which essentially holds that consciousness is separate from the mind. Okay? Then you also have the parapsychism, hope I pronounced that correctly, which means that all that begins in the universe, or all the beings in the universe, are conscious at different times. So when, or better yet, where does consciousness end after death? Is it when the body dies? Is it when the soul leaves? What is the soul?
Is there a soul?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of questions you raised there. Your fingernails, your cellular functions, your hair,
right,
still continues to divide and grow well after you're quote unquote dead. Yeah. You exhume bodies months later, if nails have grown a couple of inches, a hair has grown more than when the person was dead. So cellular growth and consciousness still continues. Maybe not so much the brain, the heart, and the lungs. So the body still continues. Now, the question you pose about consciousness, it's very valid and it's core to this discussion.
But I think that's basically what scares people. It's not the fact of being dead. It's the fact that you will cease being yourself once death occurs, or supposedly. You will lose what makes Raka Raka, you know? Or,
Well, yes. Now, that takes us to the curious case of Karen Ann Quinlan in 1960s, 1970s, where she was in a persistent vegetative state. So that means she could not do many functions on her own, but her body was still living.
right,
She could not communicate with people whether she reacted to stimuli. She could not tell you if she's in pain. She couldn't tell if you pinch your toe, which toe was it, or that a toe was being pinched at all. Yet her body was irrefutably still alive. Now, her person, as we all knew her before, clearly could not validate she was still in there.
right.
So and that's another discussion for another time about legal death, medical death, should you pull the plug and all that stuff. But what's important for this and very pertinent to this conversation is if her consciousness, her quintessential self that made Karen Ann herself was still in there, despite the fact that everything else is failing and all communication was not possible and monitoring brain waves do not show brain activity, is she in there? It's not a discussion for this forum whether there's validation and there's a valid life form and should we pull the plug, who's right, is it? The question that's here is, at what point does Izzy, who is Izzy, remain Izzy, and does Izzy, who we know now, will surpass Izzy's body once it ceases to keep life functioning?
I don't know. Because is consciousness related or attached to soul? Is your consciousness attached to your soul, essentially?
If you believe in such a soul.
Or is it two different things? You know?
Well, I think
articles, and I saw an episode, I forgot what show, that they were talking about putting, when the body dies, keeping the brain alive, and then putting that brain into a computer. Therefore, the brain is still alive, but is that brain the person, or is just a brain because it's the consciousness still within the brain, ingrained in the brain, in the cells? Or is it just a mass of flesh?
Can you download somebody's consciousness?
Exactly. To the study in 1901. You probably know this.
1901.
Yeah, by Dr. I hate my handwriting. I do believe, sorry if I mess this up, Duncan McDowell, or McDougall for that matter.
Duncan!
Yes, he sought to measure the weight lost by a human being when the soul departed his body after they died. All right? And after all the studies or whatever, guess how much the soul weighed? There's been movies made about this.
3 pounds?
21 grams.
Really?
Exactly. Now, the funny thing is that ever since that day or that experiment or whatever, people have tried to replicate it, and they did not get the same results. So therefore, those in the know, scientists and people in science, have kind of poo-pooed that whole thing, and they've regarded that whole thing is either meaningless or considered to have very little, if any, scientific fact. Now,
I concur. Um, After bodily death, you know, there will be fluid loss. There's air capacity loss. You know, for all that you think your lungs are basically balloons. So if it ceases to keep working, the air, which does account for some grams that are kept in your lungs, expires, exhausts, does not reinflate. You know,
what are
so
you going
there's a quantifiable answer to that loss of weight, that difference, which he terms as the weight of one's soul. I think more telling then would be near-death experiences. So these are people who have clearly checked all medical boxes for being clinically dead, have come back to life after certain time, a duration of which you would assume there would be hypoxia, which would be lack of oxygen. There would be injury to the brain, which would incur substantial loss, sometimes irreparable loss of memory function, higher levels. So how do we explain these individuals, which there are numerous ones, that have been scientifically validated to have been clinically dead for a said period of time, come back to life with not only clarity and measurable functions that are improved, but they come back knowing what happened while they were dead? No one told them this. No, I mean, there's many curious cases such as this. One I will cite is a very famous woman, Anita Morjani. In 2006, I believe, she had experienced massive multi-organ failure due to Hodgkin's lymphoma. It ravaged her body to the point that she was at end stage, and she was near death. Okay. She had a father who had passed away, and she had a friend who passed away due to cancer, and had witnessed that their bodies were ravaged, if not death was precipitated and brought along faster due to chemotherapy and the such. So she had witnessed this. She was already diagnosed with cancer, that she opted to go the alternative medicine herbal route. So she declined all traditional cancer treatments, which is basically toxic chemicals into your body to target the cancer cells, but it also has side effects to healthy cells. Until the very end, which she decided, okay, what can harm me do? I'm already towards the end here. I'm wasting away. She took on the medication. She's brought into a hospital. She got to a point where she went to cardiac arrest. She had doctors come in, try to resuscitate her. She fell into a coma. She was in a coma for 30 hours. Upon waking up from her coma, she could recount to everybody in the room, and this was a woman who was clinically close to dead, if not dead, and she can recount what her loved one, her husband, was saying in the room, what a nurse was saying, what the doctor was saying, what procedures they did to her while she was unresponsive. How do you account for that from a scientific point of view? The other scientific point of view is within 4 days, her tumors had shrank to 75% the size they were before. Within 6 weeks or so, she was in complete remission. During her near-death experience journey, she glided through the universe and was comforted by an undefinable force of goodness, calm, tranquility, stillness. Now she is brought up, I believe, Hindu religion, raised in Taiwan, I believe, Hong Kong, and spoke Cantonese, spoke Hindi, spoke English, and was exposed to different cultures. But during her journey, she saw her father, she saw her best friend passed away, and she was comforted by certain ideological aspects that you cannot be. They weren't translated. They were just the feeling that she got, that there is no gender, there is no religion, there's no. I mean, basically, she was given the whole John Lennon song, and she wanted desperately to stay and not to go back until her father spoke to her and say, "You must go back and live your life, knowing what's here, knowing you may die at any time, knowing that you're near death, knowing you just live life on a different tone." Now she comes back and she's in full remission, and she's on this mission to tell the world it's not really reincarnation, it's not really time and dimensions, it's not really gender, it's not any of those things that we hold dear on earth and we are preoccupied, and sometimes it dominates our life. Why would she come back with this message, including that she was cognizant and can recount everything that was performed to her body while she was on her way to the other side? Something like this has to really shake you up and give you a little pause that there may be something beyond this body.
Maybe it's nothing, and maybe it's just science. There are three central theories within near-death experiences. You have your spiritual theories, which is also called transcendental. You have your psychological theories, and you have your physiological theories in your near-death experiences. Now, obviously, she was having a physiological theory, which in
Right.
two types.
Right.
Type A, I think she's having actually type 2, which is left damage. Basically, brain damage she's had. It's brain damage. It's a damage to the bilateral frontal and occipital, but predominantly right hemisphere of the brain. It affects the right temporal parietal junction, and that's type 1. Actually, she had type 2. I'm sorry, which actually it affects meeting and communication with spirits. It can give you meeting, communication with spirits. It makes you see things, glowing bodies, voices, sounds, and music without vection. The left damage on her brain, it gives you those feelings of a presence, meeting, and yada yada, so on and so forth. That's by Olaf Blanky and Sebastian Diguez from the Inori Polytechnique Federale de Lausanne in Switzerland in 2009. So that can easily be described as that.
Absolutely. There is validity to that, in that region of your brain, that it has been studied that that region in your brain during bodily high stress moments, one of which is near death moments, to make it easier on the individual, the sensation of pain cease.
Mhm.
And it's been documented that whether it's a case of near death, whether it's a case of, let's say, a lightning strike or severe trauma like getting hit by a car, there is a moment of euphoria, if you will, where certain neurochemicals are disseminated throughout the body. You do feel pain for the free. And one of the documented consequences of which is what you stated. There is a subsequential euphoric hallucinated state where you may see loved ones, you may see a light, you may see what you think is a god, you might see and feel and even teleport your consciousness into another area where you're pain-free, almost the last body gift to the person to ease the transition to death.
Hello.
Yes, this has been documented. Correct.
I'm not discounting what she felt. I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here and giving you both sides. You guys decide, what you guys think, obviously, I'm just taking it from a different perspective here, while Raka is giving me, the nice stories. So, that being said,
I think where this segues between science and belief is what comforts people. I guess it spans from all regions about there's a finality to this existence. And whether it influences your daily routine and your moral conviction, your moral compass, or anything that you do in your life, are there consequences? Is there a heaven? Is there something more? How about my loved ones that have passed? Am I, as somebody I do respect, Neil Tyson deGrasse, the famous astrophysicist in many circles, has said science, and he himself, is data-driven.
Yeah.
You tell me the sun is hot, not just because I walk out on a hot summer day and I feel hot. I can walk out on a sunny, cold day and feel nothing. But there are data that's irrefutable. There's measurements about temperature gauges beyond this earth, beyond our protective magnetic fields and everything else, and our ozone layer, that can quantify that damn thing is hot. Hotter than anything you'll ever experience, if you ever do experience. That thing breathes life into the whole existence. Its flame touches 100 million miles away. It's science and data driven. So as he was once asked about life after death and the consciousness and everything else, he would like to believe, much like you and I and everybody else would like to believe, that there is something more to this. But as a scientist,
data
he wants to ask, where's the data? And he's not saying there isn't. He's just saying currently, today, there is no data showing that there is. Irrefutable data. There's nice research projects like Dr. Parma has in the University of Southampton and in conjunction with NYU University about near-death experiences and patients who are resuscitated. His work is in the intensive care unit, and he, by and large, had this largest study studying people who are resuscitated. And basically his drive was to find out how to be a better resuscitator. But as a consequence to his studies, it was time after time after time about individual accounts of near-death experiences and the commonality of what we just mentioned, which is possibly in conjunction with that neural pathway safeguard to ease the pain, to be in a hallucinogenic state, to kind of be disconnected, maybe something, whatever it is for each individual, to soothe their psyche so that they can make the transition of leaving this life easier. It could be a combination of both. It could very well be also another side that binds us all. Now, you brought up the very interesting topic about a subconsciousness, and it can tie into other fields, one of which is not just in death. Do we have that ESP? do we have that sixth sense where we have a premonition going on, where we have a feeling something bad is going to happen. Oh, something happened to my mom. I don't know where she's 2,000 miles away, but I just could feel it. You call and you find out that she fractured her hip at home and they're sending aid. And you hear countless stories of this, of
But now you're straying from the whole near-death experience.
I'm straying, but it's connected to the point of consciousness that you brought up. If there's a consciousness then that goes beyond the body, it could very well be electromagnetism. It could very well be a brain wave.
Maybe it's written on the DNA. Maybe it's not.
But maybe then, if there is some scientific evidence of an out-of-body experience, why cannot be then out of an after-body experience?
Yeah, I mean, look. All right.
The problem is right now that we don't have any quantifiable evidence.
Going back to what we talked. Well, I mean, it's within the same thing. There was a near-death studies. I don't exactly know that. I keep forgetting the name. I should have wrote it down. But it was run by a psychiatrist, Bruce Grayson, a psychologist, Kenneth Ring, and a cardiologist, Michael Sabom. All right. Between 1975 and 2005, some 2,500 individuals in the U.S., they've basically said, okay, we've had a near-death experience, okay? 600 from outside the U.S. and the West, 70 from Asia, and all these three guys did a study of near-death experiences in an academic setting. So basically what they did was they interview people who legally died or clinically died from cardiac arrest or resuscitated. This is actually in Southampton General Hospital. And this is a matter of fact, this is an association with the Parnia.
Dr. Parma that I brought up before, yes.
So then
the largest scale study of this type.
So you know that the majority of them failed when they put the bodies and they showed them how it would look. Only like 4 passed. They placed figures on suspended boards facing the ceiling, not visible from the floor. 4 had near-death experiences, but the other ones didn't have any out-of-body experiences. They were not able to identify the figures. So basically, I mean, if a bear shits in the wood, and no one's there to see it, did he shit in the woods? It's, I don't know. I mean, it's more questions than answers, honestly, to be honest with you. I mean, it's just bringing more shit up than not. I mean,
I think it really depends on what your belief system is. If you're a man of pure science, I can totally understand you're leaning towards this is the finality of my bodily existence. End of story. Because there is no data to support there's something afterwards. If you're a believer of things past this body, even as we're living and talking right now in this podcast, that you have a feeling, you have a part of you that you cannot completely intertwine and rely on a body aspect, but you have a consciousness. You have a belief system in a religion of a life thereafter. You have possible experiences and communications with those that have passed.
Well, let me pose a question for you. Now, do you think maybe this is why religion was created?
I believe the root of a lot of religions.
I'm not saying whether or not.
No, not only, but I believe the root of a lot of religions.
To explain all things that are unexplainable.
Naturally, but the root of most religions is crowd control.
Oh yeah,
It,
you're gonna go there.
it's a sociological crowd control, because it's not just this. You touch on so many topics, and then the priest is in charge, and a deity that's larger than life has told us so, and the preacher is the leader. You have to follow the priest, and here's commandments on how to live your life with moral codes, and the biggest strike on you will not be put in prison, cut your legs off, cut your arms off, take your riches away. It's going to be damnation thereafter. So it's not the sole reason, but it is a consequence. It's a convenient corollary to religion. But the faith system, um, beyond the religion, like maybe it's psychological, but I believe I've seen my father who passed away in certain what people call synchronicity, certain times, images, and places that just happen to be reminders that pop up, that it could be very coincidental or it could be intentional, or there's no reason in the world why that item that was his is all of a sudden showing up. Is it a message? There's things like that. There's spiritual apparitions. Again, it can be argued whether it's psychological. Is it self-fulfilling? Is it manifested because I want it to manifest? We can go into the night with all these different things. And I understand that there isn't a delineated, hardcore medical scientific evidence that I'll go zoom through this room and the temperature spiked and then the apparition had this electromagnetic charge. I get it. So I think it all boils down to a matter of faith. But there are some evidence that may be irrefutable. Like you just mentioned in that study, only a few people mentioned the figures, whatever, but there was a few.
Yeah, no, definitely. Look,
So as much as you can see one side, oh, there's so many that didn't see it. All you needed was one to say what the figures are, and it kind of blows your top off. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. All you needed was one to tell you that there's something there. And is that one person special? Is other people not special? Were they meant to be? I mean, it just raises a whole bevy of questions.
what's the coincidence that thousands of people all around the world share one of the five-stage continuum of peace, by separation, entering darkness, seeing the light, entering the light. Within, little things different here and there, but they all recount essentially the same freaking thing. What are the odds? It can't be every.
I think absolutely the odds are they evoke thought, and at the very least they ask you to be open-minded about the possibility that there is something more than this. Now, understandably, science at this point has not backed that up. However, I'm sure everyone in this listening to this podcast, everyone in the world who's not, can attest to at least one, and I can probably cite a dozen more incidents of life that is not scientifically explainable. Talking about coincidence, talking about deja vu, talking about things, events that occur only to your life in a certain way that would be odd, but for some reason was at the right time at the right place. And most of the time, it would not be in that consequence. I can tell you this, and I can tell you stories up to wazoo. There is a family member of mine who, on the day of September 11th, was late for work because of school clothes for their child in gym, forgot their gym clothes, went back to the school to drop off the gym clothes, got on train, exited the train station just as the plane hit. Normally, this person is punctual like you wouldn't believe. and was freaking out the whole time, upset at the child, upset at life, upset at the delays in the train, that she didn't make it to work on time. But because she was not at work on time, she came up, saw the plane hit, went back down to the train. And this is 99% of the time on time, if not early. On this to occur on that day, and that particular day, out of all days, these are things that give us food for thought. And I would like to think, being a human, knowing that we know, whatever can separate us from a dog, a plant, a rock, that I assume, whether it be pretentious of me or not, that there's more to it than just, I gave birth, I ate, I shat, I showered, I went to sleep.
Of course, there's something more to it. I mean, I guess it's in our innate nature that we have to believe that there's something else. It can't just be, okay, by the way, turn the light off and that's it. It's over.
Right.
I don't know.
So
I've grown up a certain way, and I just can't fathom that to be it. Maybe I'm romanticizing life a bit. I don't know. I mean,
I'm one to tell you that I would rather live a life that's romanticized and live a life with some hope that if there is a next phase, I get to be reunited with, if not those loved ones that have passed before me, maybe those in the future, maybe those I don't know, maybe all of humanity, maybe a universal consciousness, something, whatever it is. I'm hoping more than hope that there is something more than my last breath and kaput. And I guess that's where we'll leave it.
I can't say it any better. I agree completely.
And I guess with all the stuff that we threw out there for consideration, this is a very heavy topic. There's a lot of layers to it. It touches upon different belief systems.
Well, we can talk this for hours, and so we try to basically just kind of give you a little a little something there, so you guys can whet your palate and basically food for thought, man. That's all it is. It's food for thought and get you guys thinking about.
And there you have it. That's our bad juju topic for today. I know we laid on hard for you today. You know what? If you don't have any time to sit back and have some self-reflection, I think you're also doing yourself a disservice, no matter what your conclusion is. So, life thereafter, that is our bad juju topic today. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your likes and subscriptions and tuning in.
Always comment, like, subscribe, hear our podcast, follow us on all our social media platforms. We, greatly appreciate it. And if you guys have any, any questions or any stories or things you would like for us to tackle in our next, JuJu episode or anything in general, just let us know. And thank you all for joining us once again, Deader Nation. I'm Izzy.
I'm Raka. And remember, if you don't want to save yourselves, save others and save the whales.
Take care, everybody.
Have a good one.